when loving becomes a dead-end labyrinth. Love, in its purest and most idealized essence, is frequently painted as the most potent and redemptive force in the universe. It is the engine of great epics, the inspiring muse of poets and artists, and the silent promise of fulfillment that soothes human loneliness. However, the reality of the affective experience is far from a linear fairy tale. There are moments, terrible and unforgettable, when what should be a safe harbor and a refuge of peace morphs into something painfully opposite. This is when the act of loving ceases to be a harmonious dance of souls and becomes an agonizing journey, a dead-end labyrinth, where every turn, instead of revealing the exit, only deepens the confusion and pain. This is the dark and complex territory where emotions get jumbled, where the line between dedication and self-destruction becomes dangerously thin, and where the very definition of happiness together crumbles under the weight of unfulfilled expectations and accumulated grievances. As we contemplate this dramatic transformation, we cannot ignore the crucial question that echoes in the depths of the soul of everyone who has ever felt trapped in such a relationship. What leads two people who once shared the most vibrant and genuine connection to find themselves entangled in an affective knot that sucks the life out of them, turning the dream of union into a nightmare of imprisonment? The answer, unfortunately, is rarely simple. It lies in the complex interaction of past traumas, silent insecurities, destructive communication patterns, and, often, the insurmountable difficulty of one or both partners in confronting their own shadows. The labyrinth is not built by stone walls, but by invisible barriers of resentment, fear, and the stubborn refusal to accept that the original map of the relationship no longer leads to treasure, but to an emotional abyss. It is a prison of feelings, where the chains are made of sweet memories and the cell is forged by the paralyzing fear of loneliness or failure. With every hesitant step within this confusing structure, the individual confronts the most fragile and helpless version of themselves, forced to question whether personal sacrifice in the name of maintaining an ideal of love is worth the price of their very essence. The journey into this emotional labyrinth often begins subtly, almost imperceptibly. It is not a catastrophic event that inaugurates the crisis, but rather a series of small deviations, of unspoken words, of neglected needs that, combined, pave a path of incomprehension and distance. Affection, once abundant and spontaneous, gives way to a cold calculation of who gave more and who received less. Intimacy, which was the relationship's oxygen, rarefies, replaced by a heavy, charged silence, where every touch becomes an unanswered question and every gaze is averted to avoid the uncomfortable truth that resides in the other's eyes. This initial stage is crucial, as it is the moment when denial acts as a potent anesthetic. Both involved, out of fear of loss or the simple inability to envision a future outside that dynamic, persist in the illusion that everything will get better, or that true love overcomes all. They cling to memories of the past, using them as a fragile shield against the devastating reality of the present. Hope, though a virtue, in this context, becomes an anchor that prevents movement, chaining the soul to a ship that is demonstrably sinking, slowly and agonizingly. And what is the texture of this affective prison? It is the vicious cycle of fights and reconciliations, where the pause of peace is merely a prelude to the next storm, and where promises of change disintegrate at the first sign of pressure. It is the constant feeling that, no matter how much one tries, the partner will never see their worth, or, conversely, the feeling that one can never be good enough to satisfy the implicit or explicit demands of the other. Life together, which should be mutual enrichment, transforms into an energy drain, where vitality and joy are systematically sucked out to sustain a structure that is already hollow inside. Loneliness, paradoxically, becomes sharper when one is accompanied, because it is the loneliness of incomprehension, of non-belonging, of unacknowledged love in its most essential form. The person in the labyrinth begins to lose contact with their own self. Their priorities, their dreams, their friendships, and even their identity, are slowly sacrificed at the altar of the relationship. This is the most dangerous point. When the individual disfigures themselves for the sake of maintaining the pair, they lose the internal compass that could, in fact, indicate the way out of the confusion. Emotional exhaustion is the hallmark of this stage, a weariness that transcends physical fatigue and settles in the soul, making every day an arduous task and every morning a new confrontation with the same, desperate reality. The true tragedy of the dead-end labyrinth lies in the absence of a visible door for rescue. Attempts at communication fail, not due to lack of effort, but because words are filtered through thick layers of pain and distrust. What is said with the intention of healing is received as yet another accusation, and what is a sincere plea for help is interpreted as manipulation or weakness. There is, in many of these cases, an element of deeply rooted codependency, where one partner's pain feeds the other's need to be a savior, and vice versa, creating a closed, self-referential, almost masochistic system that feeds on its own misery. Separation, which to an external observer seems the obvious and rational solution, presents itself, to the one trapped, as a terrifying cliff. The fear of the unknown, the dread of starting over, the social stigma of the failed relationship, and, most painfully, the vivid memory of the initial happiness, act as fierce guardians at the entrance that could lead to freedom. It is easier and, in a way, safer, to remain in the known pain of the labyrinth than to face the uncertain emptiness that lies outside. The awakening, when it finally happens, is usually a catalytic event of intense pain, a breaking point where the soul simply refuses to continue paying the price for the illusion. It can be a moment of sudden clarity after years of darkness, an acute perception that one's own life is being wasted, or the loving and firm intervention of friends or family who manage to break the shell of isolation that the labyrinth imposed. This is not a moment of immediate relief, but the beginning of a complex and multifaceted grieving process. Mourning not only the end of the relationship as it existed, but mourning the loss of the ideal of love that was nurtured, and mourning the part of oneself that was sacrificed along the way. It is the moment to collect the shards of the fragmented identity and begin the difficult, but essential, task of reconstruction. Getting out of the labyrinth requires more than just courage. It requires a radical redefinition of love, which needs to be internalized as a concept that begins with self-love, and which can only truly be shared when one's own foundation is solid and unshakable. The solution to a dead-end labyrinth, paradoxically, does not lie in finding the exit, but in destroying the walls that imprison it. This implies deep, often painful, internal work, which may require professional guidance. It means confronting the fears that made staying in the pain more palatable than the search for happiness. It means re-establishing healthy boundaries, learning to say no to what is destructive, and, above all, honoring one's own need for peace and well-being. For some, the destruction of these walls can lead to the rediscovery and reconstruction of the relationship on more mature and realistic bases, recognizing that love is not sacrifice, but mutual growth. For most, however, the only path to the light is the acceptance of the end and the courage to tread the path of individual healing. The outcome is never defeat, but the triumph of self-sufficiency and the human capacity to rise from the ashes, stronger and with a deeper understanding of what it truly means to love. The pain of loving in a labyrinth is excruciating because it opposes the most vital impulse of the human being, the need for connection and affection, with the reality of its destruction. However, it is precisely from this pain that the possibility of genuine metamorphosis arises. When we look at these stories of effective imprisonment, we are compelled to reflect on the quality of our own bonds. You, who follow this reflection, have you ever felt trapped in a cycle where love seemed more like a sentence than a blessing? And, from your perspective, is this a problem that, once installed, truly has a solution, or is liberation just a mirage achieved through the acceptance of the end? Believing in a solution requires an unwavering faith in the human capacity for transformation, but reality teaches us that transformation, although possible, demands a commitment to the truth that many are unwilling to assume. The labyrinth is real, and the exit, for those who manage to find it, is a testament to the indomitable resilience of the human spirit which, even after being lost in the densest shadows, still relentlessly seeks light and freedom.